When you think of classes that would benefit from updates in vanilla World of Warcraft, Mage is not exactly at the top of that list. I like to call them the first real hero class of World of Warcraft. After all, they are the fastest leveler through AoE farming, they're the best gold maker by an absolute mile. A mage can pull an AoE down entire dungeons, whilst other classes would struggle with 3 to 4 mobs at once. In player versus player, they are extremely dominant due to their mix of powerful CC and burst, and in raiding they are the top performing caster, and they can make themselves free food and water, and they can teleport around the world, or just chill in a major city and sell portals to others. The mage in vanilla is an absolute monster of a class and amazing at quite literally everything. So how is Season of Discovery going to build on this class? Well, for a start, the mage is going to be getting an entirely new role in World of Warcraft that it's never experienced before. That of a healer. As for how good it will be, we don't know that yet, but either way, let's get into it and talk about the mage runes that are currently known in Season of Discovery. I want to cover the mage healing package first, as the spells really fit together with one another. First, we have Regeneration. This is your chest rune. This applies a moderate heal over 3 seconds and then marks the target for 30 seconds with a temporal beacon. 100% of arcane damage done will be converted to healing and divided up among all targets affected by a temporal beacon. Now, it's important to know this ability is channeled as well, as in the heal over time portion is applied similar to how Mistweaver monks use Soothing Mist, and it appears also to not have a cooldown. Now, you may be thinking here, this is atonement healing that priests get in Cataclysm, and yes, it is quite similar to that in that you are dealing damage to then heal your allies. But this is basically the chronomancer healer type class fantasy, and it exists in Classic before Retail. The potential healing with this also seems very good, especially in AoE situations. AoE is not capped in any form in vanilla, so if you say beaconed a paladin tank who is just blasting AoE threat, and then pressed Arcane Explosion, if he's got 20 or so mobs hitting him, he's just going to be immortal. His health bar will go back to full with every single Arcane Explosion you cast. Oh, and you're still a mage pressing Arcane Explosion, so you're gonna be doing some great damage as well. You will be double dipping from threat though, from topping the heals and damage, so that could be a bit of a problem. But just before this video went out, I managed to find a rather big change to regeneration, and I'm assuming mass regeneration too, which are definitely worth talking about. The changes are after you cast the regeneration spell, your fire and frost spell damage will be reduced by 50% for 5 minutes, and you won't be able to use Ice Block. I'm assuming these two changes are targeted at PvP, where otherwise the mage will be able to reset kind of infinitely and always be at full health. On the more PvE side of this spell, it seems as though the healing done from arcane damage has been lowered from 100% to 40%, so that is already quite the sizable nerf. I'm assuming this was done for AoE reasons, as I'd already highlighted, but this is also going to affect single target quite a bit. I still think this will be reasonably powerful, you know, but we'll have to see how it plays out on live servers. I can only assume from Blizzard's testing though, that this ability was broken beyond belief to be changed this much. There is also an AoE version of this spell called Mass Regeneration, which will go on your leg rune. This appeared to have a 6-second cooldown from what I could tell. Mass Regeneration heals and marks players within the target's party in a 15-yard range, and applies a beacon for 15 seconds. So it is quite a small AoE, you're going to need people to stack for this, and the beacon is also half the duration of the single target spell. It's basically what Power Word Radiance is for Discipline. This is your big setup for heavy damage coming into your whole party. Again, this seems very strong when paired up with AoE pulls, particularly in dungeons or say, I don't know, 10-man raiding environments. But what if you care more about single target heals, or you just don't have enough things to AoE? I mean, in Classic, it's usually the case that you do care about healing one target more so than your entire party. Well, that's where you have a bit of choice as the mage healer, in which rune you take on your gloves. First we have Rewind Time. This heals a beacon target for all the damage they've taken over the past 5 seconds. It really depends on the cooldown of this spell as for how viable of a choice it may be, and it can't just be randomly taken as a heal either, as you or another mage will needed to have beaconed the target before this can be cast. This sounds good for when there's going to be large predictable spikes of damage, maybe from breath attacks from bosses, or encounters where the tank will be stunned. However, there is another spell, one that you will be a bit more familiar with, which can be applied to your gloves as well, and that is a modified version of Arcane Blast. Similar to how it's always been, it will stack up its damage and mana cost up to a total of 4 times. But this new version will also cause you to do bonus healing as well. A max stack Arcane Blast will be 700% extra mana, 60% more damage caused, and 60% more heals. I mean, maybe this is just straight up good enough to be part of a DPS focused arcane build now. And as for arcane missiles, even in Season of Discovery it looks like they can't catch a break. Maybe they'll be getting a rune later on though. Also, Arcane Power, the capstone talent in Arcane, makes spells cost 30% more and for you to do 30% more damage. Is that 30% cost increase just the baseline cost? Or is there max stack Arcane Blast with Arcane Power going to make your Arcane Blast cost 910% more mana? Because that sounds kind of expensive, don't you think? Either way, that's kind of the mage healing package here. It looks very good in AoE situations. It's probably going to generate a ton of threat though. Saying that, when I think about it, Arcane does get 40% less threat through talents. But will this also affect their heals? Is the spell school of arcane healing arcane? I mean, maybe, I guess that makes sense, but we don't know yet. Anyways, let's get back around to the runes that will be applied to your chest, as the non-healer mages will also have plenty to look forwards to. First up is Fingers of Frost. This is a really powerful talent that was introduced in the Burning Crusade. It causes your chill effects to have a chance to make your next 2 spells act as if the target were frozen. Okay, so unless you are a healing mage, the other runes on this row basically don't exist if this rune works the way I think it will. I went and tested whether Fingers of Frost could proc from slow immune targets. I did have to do this on live RAF servers on a level 70 mage. Maybe it works differently in vanilla, I don't know. But Fingers of Frost was still proccing as normal. Now Frost is already an amazing leveling spec, great for dungeons, and is played at the start of endgame in vanilla due to tons of mobs being fire immune. Also again, if this is working how it does in later expansions, your Frostbite talent will always proc Fingers of Frost as well. So one of the best PvP classes in the game just got way better. And wait till you hear about what mages will get later. This gets even better than this. So yeah, this rune is going to be very, very powerful. For what it's worth, I think the other 2 runes in this row are playable, but just later on when stat scaling has improved a bit. Burnout increases the spell crit chance with all spells by 15%, but casted spells cost 1% more of your base mana. That seems like a pretty easy trade-off. 15% crit for a small mana increase? Fire mages are gonna love this one once the spec starts to pick up with some later game gearing. Crit as a stat really starts to get better the more of it you have, and with talents such as Ignite, I can see this eventually being the rune that's taken in this row. Finally, for the chest runes is Enlightenment. 10% more damage dealt when over 70% mana, 10% more mana regeneration when below 30% mana. This one kind of has an arcane DPS vibe to it, and it will stack with the Arcane Meditation talent for a total of 25% mana regen whilst casting when you're under 30% mana. That's not half bad, to be honest. Remember, in vanilla, evocation scales with your spirit too. Maybe your arcane mage DPSs out there should start theory crafting a build that wants plenty of spirit so that they can keep those arcane blasts going. If fights are as short as they usually are in vanilla, it has potential. Moving on to the leg runes now, we have Living Flame. It kind of reminds you of Dreadflame from Archimond a little bit, doesn't it? A flame that moves towards the target, leaving fire in its wake that deals damage, lasting 20 seconds. It also says Spellfire damage. That should be fire plus arcane, which means this rune won't be dead content in Molten Core, presumably. A base damage of 42 is not half bad considering it's hitting all targets. That's about halfway between Arcane Explosion rank 1 and 2 damage-wise, but it's going to tick up to 20 times. I could see this being the pick on AoE farming or dungeon content for sure. Next we have Arcane Surge. This is a big single target nuke for your Arcane mages, or maybe a big heal for your Arcane healers. It gains up to 300% increased damage based on your mana remaining. So imagine every 10% of your mana that you have unspent, this is going to add 30% to Arcane Surge's damage. After that, you gain a massive amount of mana regen for the following 8 seconds. This is a modification of a talent from Dragonflight, and I believe is the most up-to-date spell that's been added to Season of Discovery. In Dragonflight, it's a casted spell too, which is a big nuke that refills your mana bar afterwards. Say goodbye to Pom Pyro, say hello to Pom Arcane Surge, maybe? Doesn't quite have the same ring to it. Still, it's a versatile spell that could act as a big nuke in PvP, a massive heal, or just a mana regeneration tool. Looking forward to see what kind of mage builds this fits best into. Finally, for the leg runes is something that will be more familiar to us, Icy Veins. I believe this spell is the same in both TBC and Wrath, 20% spell casting speed and no spell pushback for 20 seconds. Having no spell power pushback is very OP for vanilla in PvP. All casts get pushed back infinitely as long as something is hitting you in vanilla, and now you can just ignore that for 20 seconds. And it's got 20% casting speed on it too, that's pretty great as well. Imagine hunters using Broken Tooth in PvP will be griefing themselves against mages now, since you can ignore casting knockback with Icy Veins, and Fingers of Frost will proc more from the faster attacks. Unless you can arcane shot off Icy Veins, that is, and given that it's a magic buff, you should be able to. But now we're on to the gloves, with only 2 runes left to cover since the other 2 were related to the arcane healer style for the most part. Firstly, Living Bomb makes its way to Classic. Whether you associate this spell more with Baron Geddon or the Wrath of the Lich King Fire Mage, it's a spell that's been in the WoW universe for a long time. In vanilla, however, there is no hot streak talent, so don't think you're going to be getting instant cast Pyroblast. Also, periodic effects do not crit. I'm just saying if this could crit, you could Fingers of Frost proc it, and, well, that would be something, wouldn't it? Still, if enemies are living for over 12 seconds, which might be a tall order in vanilla to be honest, this is going to put up some really impressive numbers on AoE. Also, if you're AoE leveling, this is just the dream talent to get hold of. Mages already have so many ways to slow enemies, and now you can just run around them in a circle spamming Living Bomb. It should really be strong for that style of play. And I've probably saved the best for last here, Ice Lance. This just has to be overpowered for vanilla in all areas of content. If you look at what mages got for PvP, they got Fingers of Frost, Icy Veins, and Ice Lance. Those are some enormous buffs, which will ensure the mage remains a very popular pick in this area of content. Imagine a melee's hitting you, they proc Frostbite, you get 2 Fingers of Frost, you can Ice Lance them twice into a Nova, and then Frostbolt Ice Lance, and hey, you've just pretty much won any fights in the game. For PvE, assuming that Frostbolt will be proccing Fingers of Frost on slow immune targets, this also seems exceptionally strong, and also very mana efficient, which is never a bad thing in vanilla either. I think this is one of those spells which is a bit too flexible to make sense in vanilla, but hey, we will see how it goes. Maybe it's been tuned down quite heavily, to the point where it doesn't feel so overpowered. And that is the mage, so far, in Season of Discovery. So let's finish up with some closing thoughts on everything. The healing package seems exceptionally strong on AoE content, and reasonable on single target, possible threat generating machine, which is not ideal. Frost Mage has got some of the best possible talents and abilities Blizzard could have picked from later expansions. This spec will be nasty in PvP, and PvE too, assuming it works how I think it will. The Arcane DPS spec seems interesting and is where the big theory crafting will be done. With short enough fights, maybe it does become the go-to. Also, there's not many enemies that are immune to Arcane in vanilla compared to the other 2 spell schools. The fire option seems solid, but fire as a spec really needs that extra crit, which you start to see much later in the game, like AQ 40 levels of later. And since we're going to be starting at level 25, it might be some time till you see fire mages being popular. But that is just what I think from having checked out the runes we know at the moment. What do you reckon about the state of the mage heading into Season of Discovery? Are you planning to try out the chronomancer type healing build, or will you be sticking with a more traditional DPS role? Let me know below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you on the next one very soon.